The stars above shimmered in a seemingly peaceful galaxy, but beneath that calm, something was stirring, something that would change everything. A terrifying presence had arrived. The Zorathians, an ancient race of warlords, were feared by every civilization that came across their path, but no one feared their leader more than the galaxy itself. Her name was Naira, and her power was unmatched. Her reputation for brutal conquests spread across space, and the thought of facing her forces made even the strongest tremble. The humans knew the Zorathians well. Over the years, they had watched helplessly as Naira and her army devastated entire planets. They had heard the whispers, how Naira's fleet was made up of sleek, nearly invisible warships that could destroy entire cities with just a flick of a switch. But it wasn't just her ships that made her legendary. Naira was a master of both technology and combat, a woman whose mere presence struck fear into the hearts of all who opposed her. Now her eyes were set on humanity. On a remote colony on the edge of the galaxy, a small human outpost had been preparing for the inevitable. The defenses were weak, outdated, and the people were terrified. They knew Naira was coming, and they knew there was little they could do to stop her. The colony's leaders had already given up hope of survival. The best they could do was evacuate the civilians and let the soldiers do their best to hold the line. But there was one man who refused to give up. Lieutenant Marcus Blackwell, a decorated soldier with a reputation for surviving against impossible odds, had already made his decision. Unlike most of his comrades, Marcus wasn't going to run. He was going to fight. He wasn't afraid of Naira, even if everyone else in the galaxy was. As the first wave of Zorathian warships entered the planet's atmosphere, the ground shook. Orbital bombardments began, and explosions lit up the sky as Naira's ships released their deadly payloads. Buildings crumbled, fire and smoke filled the air, and chaos erupted in every direction. The people screamed, scattering in panic, trying to find shelter. The Zorathian war machines descended, towering over the ruins of the city, their armored drones marching forward with deadly precision. It was a massacre, and the humans had no chance. Yet, amid the destruction, Marcus moved with calm determination. He knew he couldn't take on the whole army alone, but he could make a difference. He activated his cloaking device, a piece of advanced technology he had stolen from a previous mission, and moved swiftly through the debris. The Zorathian drones patrolled the streets, their glowing red eyes scanning the surroundings. But Marcus, with his human ingenuity, was nearly invisible. His mind raced. He knew that Naira was somewhere nearby, watching everything unfold. She wouldn't be far behind her drones, and if she saw him, she would certainly take him down without hesitation. But Marcus wasn't concerned about his own survival. His mission was clear: survive long enough to reach Naira and make contact. If he could survive long enough, he could stall her, find a way to negotiate, or even sabotage her plans. But the odds were stacked against him. As he moved further into the heart of the battle, he saw Naira's flagship above, dark and menacing. It hovered above the ruins like a god, casting a shadow over the destruction below. The ship was massive, its sleek, black hull glistening in the light of the explosions. The people below had no hope of defeating it. Marcus, however, wasn't thinking like the others. He didn't view Naira's fleet as invincible. He saw an opportunity. Suddenly, the cloaking device flickered. The signal was unstable, and Marcus knew it wouldn't hold much longer. The drones were getting closer. He sprinted toward the nearest building, climbing its wrecked remains, the sound of the machine's heavy footsteps growing louder with every second. His heart pounded in his chest as he reached the rooftop. From there, he could see it. Naira's ship, the source of all the destruction. At that moment, a figure appeared in the sky above him. A Zorathian warship, dark as night, descended slowly and silently. It was a massive vessel, armed to the teeth with weapons designed to annihilate entire armies. And aboard that ship was Naira herself, the woman everyone feared. She stood at the ship's command center, watching the chaos unfold below, her expression cold and calculating. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed the lone human soldier standing on the rooftop. Marcus didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon and aimed it at the approaching ship, knowing it would do little good. But it wasn't about winning the battle. It was about getting her attention. To his surprise, Naira didn't order an immediate attack. Instead, her ship halted, hovering in the air, its engines whirring softly. She gazed down at Marcus, intrigued. No human had ever dared to confront her like this. Most ran, hid, or simply surrendered. Interesting. Naira's voice echoed through the comm system, smooth and authoritative. "If a lone human dares to challenge me." Marcus didn't flinch. "You may have the power to destroy worlds, but that doesn't mean you'll win this one," he said, his voice steady. "You're not invincible." Naira laughed, a sound that could freeze anyone's blood. "Brave words, soldier. But do you really think you can stop me?" Marcus met her gaze. "I'll find a way," he said, clenching his fist. "You won't conquer us without a fight." A long silence passed. For a moment, Naira simply stared at him. Then she spoke again, her tone changing, softer now, almost curious. "Why?" she asked. "Why fight for these people? They will fall before me, just like every other planet in my wake." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Because we don't give up. Humans will fight until we can't anymore." Naira's eyes flickered with something like respect. "You are a rare human, perhaps too rare to simply crush under my heel." The tension in the air thickened. For the first time, Marcus felt like he wasn't just facing an enemy. He was facing something more. Something complicated. Naira was more than just a ruthless conqueror. She was someone who saw strength, even in an enemy. "Get ready, soldier," she said. "You may have just made things more interesting." With those words, Naira's ship retreated into the sky, leaving Marcus standing alone on the rooftop. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. The silence after Naira's departure felt heavy. Marcus stood there, staring up at the sky, his heart still pounding in his chest. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The Zorathian warlord, feared by every civilization in the galaxy, had actually taken notice of him. Most soldiers would have been terrified, running in fear or hiding in the shadows, but Marcus was different. He wasn't afraid. Not yet. The battle still raged around him. The sky was filled with the sound of explosions, the screech of Zorathian drones ripping through the air, and the cries of his fellow soldiers. Marcus knew he couldn't stand still. He had to move, act, and keep fighting if he was going to give humanity any chance of surviving this invasion. His mind raced as he activated his cloaking device again. It flickered to life, wrapping him in near invisibility, allowing him to move through the chaos without being seen. He darted through the streets, his eyes scanning for targets, for anything that could help him turn the tide. But in the back of his mind, one thought kept repeating. Naira. He had spoken to her, faced her down. For a moment, she had even seemed to respect him. It was a strange feeling, one he couldn't quite place. It wasn't the fear most people felt when facing her. It was something else, something more dangerous. As Marcus moved deeper into the heart of the battle, he found a small group of soldiers, huddled together behind a ruined building, trying to regroup. They looked up in surprise as he approached, their faces filled with both relief and confusion. "Lieutenant Blackwell," one of them called out. "We thought you were." "I'm still here," Marcus interrupted. "We've got to keep moving. The fight isn't over." The soldiers nodded, and Marcus quickly took charge, organizing them into small teams. They had to hit the Zorathian drones, slow them down long enough to give the civilians a chance to escape. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. As they moved out, Marcus's thoughts kept drifting back to Naira. He couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching him, studying him. He'd never faced an enemy like her before. She wasn't just another conqueror. She was calculating, intelligent, and ruthless in ways that humans couldn't fully understand. Her reputation wasn't built on sheer strength alone. It was her mind, her ability to manipulate and control that made her so dangerous. For the first time, Marcus wondered if he could actually stop her. He had been trained to fight, to survive, but could he defeat a warlord like Naira? Could any human? The battle seemed to drag on for hours. The Zorethians were relentless, their drones unyielding, tearing through the human defenses with ease. Marcus's team fought bravely, but it was clear that they were outmatched. The odds were against them, and the constant explosions and gunfire left little room for hope. Suddenly, Marcus's comm device crackled to life. It was a message from command. "Lieutenant Blackwell, you need to fall back. The situation is critical. We've lost the southern quadrant. We can't hold them off much longer." Marcus's stomach twisted. The southern quadrant was home to the civilian shelters. If they lost it, there would be no chance for the people to escape. "We're not falling back," Marcus responded, his voice cold. "We'll hold the line. We'll fight until the last man." There was a brief pause before the voice on the other end replied, "Understood, Lieutenant. Good luck." Marcus didn't have time to waste. He knew that every minute mattered. The civilians had to get out, and fast. He gave the order for his team to push forward, toward the heart of the Zorethian assault. As they advanced, Marcus's mind kept turning over the same question. What was Naira's plan? Why hadn't she destroyed the colony completely? Why had she spared him? It didn't make sense. The Zorethians were merciless. They didn't leave survivors. But Naira, she was different. She was playing the game, and Marcus was part of it. He just didn't know the rules yet. The next few minutes were a blur of violence and chaos. The team fought their way through the wreckage, taking out drones and clearing paths for the civilians. But even with the cloaking device and their best efforts, they were losing ground. The Zorethians had them outnumbered and outgunned. Then, without warning, the ground shook. A deafening roar echoed through the air, followed by a flash of light. Marcus barely had time to react before a massive explosion tore through the building in front of him, sending debris flying in every direction. His team scrambled to take cover, and Marcus's heart raced as he looked around, trying to assess the situation. There was no sign of the source of the explosion, no indication of where the attack had come from. Then, a voice echoed from above. "You fight well for a human." Marcus's head snapped up. There, hovering above him in her sleek, black warship, was Naira. She looked down at him with a calm, almost amused expression, as if the destruction happening below was nothing more than a game. The warship lowered, its engines humming as it descended to eye level. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He had to act fast. "What do you want from us?" he shouted, his voice steady despite the danger. Naira's lips curled into a smile. "I want you to understand something, human," she said, her voice cold yet strangely inviting. "I don't need to destroy you. I want to see what you will do next." "You're interesting." Marcus narrowed his eyes. "You're toying with us." "I am simply curious," she replied. "You are the first human I have ever encountered who doesn't cower in fear. You might be the first one to actually challenge me." Marcus's thoughts raced. He couldn't let her see any weakness. He had to be strong for his team, for the civilians, and for humanity. "We don't need to challenge you," he said, his voice hardening. "We just need to survive." Naira's expression softened, just slightly. "We shall see," she murmured, before her warship ascended once again, disappearing into the chaos above. As the warship vanished into the smoke and dust, Marcus stood in stunned silence. What had just happened? What did Naira want from him? Why had she spared him? The questions lingered in his mind, unanswered, as the battle raged on around him. One thing was certain: Naira was no ordinary enemy, and Marcus would have to face her again. But this time, it would be on his terms. The night was colder than usual. As Marcus lay awake in the small, makeshift shelter where his team had set up camp, the sounds of distant explosions and gunfire echoed in the distance. It felt like the entire galaxy was at war, and humanity was on the brink of annihilation. But Marcus couldn't shake the image of Naira from his mind. Her cold, calculating eyes, her unnerving calm as she hovered above him in her warship. She wasn't just another invader. She was different, more intelligent, more dangerous, more human in a way. He had seen the destruction she was capable of. He had witnessed her power firsthand when she destroyed an entire building with a single blast from her warship. And yet, she hadn't killed him. She hadn't even tried. She had shown curiosity. It was as if she wanted to understand him. But why? The question lingered in Marcus's mind like a constant whisper. He couldn't focus on the battle, the mission, or even his own survival without knowing the answer. What did Naira want from him? What was her plan? And more importantly, why had she spared him? It wasn't long before his thoughts were interrupted by a soft beeping noise coming from his communicator. Marcus quickly sat up, his heart racing. It was a secure transmission. He tapped the device, and a voice crackled to life. "Lieutenant Blackwell, do you read me?" It was Commander Ellis, the leader of the human resistance on this planet. His voice was strained, tired. They had been fighting for days, and it was clear that the situation was becoming increasingly dire. "I hear you, Commander. What's the status?" Marcus responded, trying to keep his voice steady despite the overwhelming tension. "The southern quadrant has fallen," Ellis said, his tone heavy. "We've lost most of our forces. The Zorethian drones have overrun our positions. We're pulling back to the last safe zone, but we're running out of time." Marcus's stomach tightened. The last safe zone was on the other side of the planet, and it wasn't equipped to withstand a full Zorethian assault. If they didn't make it there soon, they'd be caught in a deadly crossfire. "We can't pull back," Marcus said, his voice firm. "We need to find a way to stop them before it's too late." "I know," Ellis replied. "But we're outmatched, Lieutenant. We need help." Marcus thought for a moment, weighing his options, and then it hit him. Naira. She had spared him for a reason. She wasn't just interested in him as a human soldier. She wanted something more. Something unexpected. "I think I may have a solution," Marcus said, his voice low. "But it's going to be risky." "What do you have in mind?" Ellis asked, his voice skeptical. "I'm going to make contact with Naira." There was a long pause before Ellis responded. "Are you insane? She's the one leading the invasion. You can't." "I'm not going to fight her, Commander," Marcus interrupted. "I'm going to talk to her. She's not like the others. She's different. I think she might be willing to make a deal." "A deal?" Ellis said, his tone filled with disbelief. "What could we possibly offer her?" "That's what I need to figure out," Marcus said, already reaching for his gear. "But I'll take the risk. We have to try something. We can't keep fighting this war with only the odds stacked against us." Ellis hesitated for a moment before finally sighing. "Fine. But you're on your own with this. I'll support you as much as I can. But if this goes south, you need to get out of there fast." "I will," Marcus said. "I promise." With that, Marcus ended the transmission and made his way out of the shelter. The stars above seemed distant and cold, but he had no time for hesitation. This was the only chance he had to find out what Naira wanted, and maybe, just maybe, to turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. He activated his cloaking device, the familiar hum of energy enveloping him, rendering him invisible to the naked eye. He moved through the ruins of the city, avoiding Zorethian patrols and skimming the outskirts of their strongholds. He had no intention of getting caught. Not this time. As he neared the outskirts of the battlefield, he spotted Naira's warship hovering in the distance. It was perched above the wreckage of what used to be a human settlement, its sleek black form blending with the smoke and dust. Marcus took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He moved forward, cautiously, keeping an eye on the warship. As he approached, a sudden flicker of movement caught his attention. A group of Zorethian soldiers were patrolling nearby, their weapons raised and scanning for any signs of human activity. Marcus froze, his heart pounding in his chest. But before they could spot him, the warship descended, landing with a soft thud. The soldiers halted, their eyes wide as Naira herself stepped out of the ship, her figure as imposing as ever. Her eyes immediately found Marcus, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "You're bold to come here, human," Naira said, her voice low and dangerous. "Did you think I wouldn't notice you?" Marcus stepped forward, his heart racing. "I came to talk. I'm not here to fight." Naira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Talk? To me?" "Yes," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "I think we both want the same thing. I'm not asking you to join us, but I think we can make a deal." "A deal?" Naira repeated, her tone intrigued. "And why would I make a deal with you?" "Because you're not like the others," Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence. "You're not here just to destroy. You have a purpose. You have a plan. And I want to know what it is." For a long moment, Naira said nothing. She simply watched him, her expression unreadable. But then, to Marcus's surprise, she nodded slightly. "Very well, human," she said. "I will hear you out." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, and for the first time since the invasion began, Marcus allowed himself to believe that humanity might just have a chance. This was it. The unlikely alliance had begun. Marcus had never imagined he would find himself in this position, standing across from Naira, the alien warlord who had struck fear into the hearts of entire star systems. Offering her an alliance was both daring and dangerous. But somehow, against all odds, he felt a strange calm. Maybe it was the overwhelming desire to save humanity, or maybe it was just the realization that his back was against the wall, and he had nowhere to go but forward. Naira's towering presence loomed over him as she studied him with her piercing red eyes. Her sleek armor reflected the dim light from the fires in the distance. There was no emotion on her face, just the cold, calculating gaze of someone who had seen countless wars and fought in every one of them. And yet, despite all that, there was something different about this encounter, something that made Marcus feel like he might actually stand a chance. "You have a lot of nerve, human," Naira said, her voice smooth and cold. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish to stand before me like this. Do you really think you can make a deal with me?" Marcus didn't flinch. He had been in situations like this before, confronting impossible odds, making decisions that could get him killed. But he had learned long ago that hesitation was more dangerous than anything else. So he pressed on. "I'm not here to beg, Naira. I'm here because I know you're not like the others," Marcus said, his voice steady. "I've seen what you can do, and I know you have a purpose. You're not just here to destroy. You want something more. So let's talk." Naira's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't move. She studied him, as if trying to figure out his true intentions. For a long moment, there was silence between them, broken only by the distant sounds of war. The battle raged on in the background. Humanity's final stand against the Zorathian invaders. But here, in this desolate wasteland, Marcus and Naira stood alone, the weight of their choices hanging heavily in the air. "You're right about one thing," Naira finally said. "I'm not like the others. I didn't come here to destroy without reason. But my people are different. We fought for generations to bring order to the chaos, to bring peace, and sometimes peace can only be achieved through force." Marcus felt a flicker of doubt, but he quickly pushed it aside. He had no time for second-guessing. He had come this far, and now there was no turning back. "I understand that," Marcus said, "but we don't have to destroy each other to achieve peace. What if we could work together? What if we could stop the Zorathian invasion, save both our people, and build something new from the ashes?" Naira tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "And what exactly do you think we could build together, human? You're asking me to trust you. when your people have been nothing but a thorn in our side? Do you think your human spirit will convince me to join you?" Marcus took a step forward, his eyes locking onto hers. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, but you know as well as I do that the Zorathians are a threat to both of us. They don't care about your peace. They only care about conquering and enslaving everyone in their path. If we don't stop them, neither of us will survive." For a moment, Naira's expression softened, but only for the briefest of seconds. The walls she had built around herself were formidable, but even she couldn't ignore the reality of the Zorathian threat. After all, her people had been engaged in a war for centuries, and the Zorathians were a force unlike any they had encountered before. "You make a compelling argument," Naira said, her tone less cold now. "But I still don't know if I can trust you. What if this is just another human trick? A last-ditch effort to save your species?" Marcus hesitated. He knew she had a point. Trust was a rare commodity in a war like this, especially when every race had been deceived and betrayed at one point or another. But he wasn't here to lie. He was here because he believed that humanity, and possibly even Naira's people, could survive if they fought together. "You don't have to trust me completely," Marcus said. "But you can trust that I'm willing to fight beside you if it means stopping the Zorathians. You've seen what they're capable of. We both know that alone, neither of us stands a chance. But together, we might be able to take them down." Naira looked at him for a long time, and Marcus could see the wariness in her eyes. She was calculating the risks, trying to determine whether this human could actually offer something valuable, or if he was just another desperate soldier. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "All right, human," Naira said, her voice steady. "I'll give you one chance, but don't mistake this for trust. It's simply a recognition of the reality we face. If you're willing to fight alongside me, then we'll see what your kind is truly capable of." Marcus nodded, relief flooding through him, though he knew the hardest part was still to come. "Thank you. You won't regret it." Naira turned her back to him, signaling for her soldiers to approach. The battlefield was just ahead, and there was no time to waste. "Then let's make sure we're ready for what comes next. The Zorathians won't wait for us to make our move." As Marcus followed her, a sense of determination settled over him. He had forged an alliance with one of the most feared beings in the galaxy, and together they would fight against the invasion. The odds were still stacked against them, but for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like they had a real chance. The battle ahead would be unlike anything they had ever faced, but Marcus knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. The war within him was far from over, but for now, at least, he had a purpose, and that purpose was to stop the Zorathians, no matter the cost. The battlefield had shifted. The uneasy alliance between Marcus and Naira, the fierce alien warlord, had brought hope to the human soldiers, a glimmer of light in the midst of endless darkness. Together, they had pushed back the Zorathian invaders, one battle at a time. But even as they celebrated their small victories, Marcus felt an uneasy tension growing in the air. Something wasn't right. It started with the whispers. Late at night, around the campfires, Marcus overheard the soldiers talking in hushed voices. They were fearful, unsure whether the alliance with Naira was truly a step forward or if it was leading them down a dangerous path. And then there was the strange behavior from Naira's side. She was always the calm, calculating warlord, but recently she had become distant, almost cold. The spark that had once ignited their collaboration seemed to have faded, replaced by something darker, something sinister. Marcus tried to ignore his growing suspicion, focusing instead on the war. The Zorathians were relentless, and every day brought new threats, new enemies to face. But when Naira called him to meet her in her tent that evening, he felt a deep chill in his gut. The air was heavy with tension, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change everything. As he entered the tent, he saw Naira standing by a holographic map, her back turned to him. Her usual composure was gone, replaced by an air of frustration. The soft hum of the hologram was the only sound in the room, but it was deafening in the silence between them. "I need to speak with you, human," Naira said without turning around. Marcus stood still for a moment, studying her. There was something in her voice, something that made him uneasy. "What's going on, Naira?" he asked, trying to keep his tone steady. "You've been distant lately." She turned to face him, her red eyes flashing with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "You've been asking questions, Marcus. Questions I didn't think you would ask." His heart skipped a beat. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could destroy everything we've worked for," Naira replied coldly. "I've been patient with you. I've let you believe that our alliance could work. But now, it's time for you to understand the truth." Marcus' blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Naira's eyes hardened. "I never wanted this war to end. I wanted to conquer. I wanted to destroy, just like the rest of my people. I didn't care about your species. I used you. All of you. You're nothing but pawns in a game I've been playing." The shock hit Marcus like a physical blow. His mind raced, trying to process what she had just said. Everything. Their alliance, the battles they had fought together, the victories they had celebrated, had been a lie. Naira had never meant it. She had never cared. "You?" Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. "You betrayed us. All of us." Naira's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "You were never more than a tool to me. And now, the Zorathians are coming. You'll die, just like the rest of them." Marcus's mind raced. He couldn't believe it. He had trusted her. He had believed in her. And now, in the face of betrayal, everything he had fought for felt meaningless. But even as the despair threatened to consume him, a strange determination rose within him. He had never been one to back down from a fight. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would do it again. Naira might have betrayed him, but that didn't mean he was going to let her destroy everything. "Why now?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Why tell me this now?" Naira's smile faltered for a moment, and Marcus could see a flicker of regret in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, calculating warlord he had first met. "Because I want you to know the truth, and because I want you to suffer." Marcus took a deep breath, his hands tightening into fists. "You're wrong. I won't just roll over and die. I'm going to stop you. I'll fight, even if I'm the last one standing." Naira chuckled softly, almost as if she was amused by his defiance. "You don't get it, do you? The Zorathians are already on their way. The alliance we built, it means nothing. Your people will fall, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Marcus knew she was right. The Zorathians were relentless, and the alliance had already begun to crumble. But he also knew that his fight wasn't over. Even if he had to do it alone, he would fight for humanity. He would not let her win. Not this time. "You're wrong about one thing, Naira," Marcus said, his voice steady now, full of conviction. "I'm not going to die. Not today. And neither are the humans. We've faced worse than you, and we've survived. I'm going to make sure we survive again." Naira's expression darkened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned her back on him, as if dismissing him. But before she could speak again, the ground trembled beneath them. A low rumble, followed by a deafening roar, filled the air. The Zorathians were here. Marcus didn't wait for her to make the first move. He bolted for the door, his mind set on one thing: getting back to his soldiers and preparing them for the battle of their lives. It didn't matter what Naira had done. It didn't matter that their alliance had been a lie. The Zorathians were coming, and it was up to him to lead the fight. But as he ran through the camp, a deep sense of dread settled in his gut. He had no idea what kind of hell awaited them on the battlefield, but he knew one thing: this would be the ultimate test, a test of loyalty, of survival, and of sacrifice. The war was far from over, And now Marcus would have to face the consequences of his betrayal. The cost would be high, but he was ready. No matter what happened next, he would fight. For humanity, for survival, and for the future. The first shots rang out in the distance, signaling the beginning of the final battle. The test had begun. The sound of battle filled the air. Explosions rocked the ground, and the roar of energy weapons echoed through the barren landscape. The Zorethian forces, having arrived in full force, were pushing forward, their towering warships casting long shadows over the field. It felt like the end. The odds were overwhelming. And yet, as Marcus ran through the chaos, there was something burning in his chest: hope. The soldiers, though shaken by the sudden betrayal, still fought with everything they had. The human spirit, unbroken, relentless, and determined, was alive in every soldier. And Marcus was leading them. The same soldier who had once stood beside Naira, the fearsome alien warlord, now stood as the one to stop the very forces she had once commanded. The war was far from over, but the fate of humanity hung on a razor's edge. His mind flashed back to the moments before the battle. He could still hear Naira's words echoing in his mind. She had told him that it was hopeless, that humanity would fall. But Marcus knew that she had underestimated something critical, something that no alien race, no matter how advanced, could ever understand: the power of the human will. As he moved between his soldiers, giving orders and boosting morale, Marcus couldn't help but notice how they had rallied despite everything. His leadership had inspired them, had reminded them why they were fighting. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for something greater, for freedom, for the future, for their families. They were fighting for humanity's right to exist. And then, through the smoke and gunfire, he saw her. Naira, the warlord who had once stood by his side, the one who had betrayed him, was leading the Zorethian forces against them. She was a sight to behold, standing tall on the battlefield, her red armor gleaming under the flashes of energy weapons. Her presence commanded fear, and even the Zorethians followed her with a kind of awe. She was a leader, ruthless and cunning, and she had once been his ally. But that was before she had shown her true nature. That was before she had revealed her plan to destroy everything Marcus and his people had fought for. Despite the hatred that burned inside him, Marcus knew one thing: he couldn't let her win. No matter what she had done, she had still been his ally once. And in that moment, he saw the faintest flicker of hesitation in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was regret. He couldn't tell, but it gave him a glimmer of hope. The battle raged on. The Zorethians were relentless, their superior technology overwhelming the humans at every turn. But Marcus and his soldiers fought with everything they had. They used every trick in the book: cloaking devices to hide their movements, EMP blasts to disable the enemy's weapons, and old-fashioned grit and determination. They couldn't match the Zorethians in firepower, but they made up for it with ingenuity and courage. It wasn't just the soldiers fighting, though. The civilians, the families, the people who had been caught in the middle of this war were also standing up. They were helping, providing support, fighting alongside the soldiers with everything they had. Children carried supplies, women and men worked together to build barricades, and even the elderly had joined the resistance. Humanity was united in a way that no alien race could ever comprehend. But just when it seemed like the humans might have a chance, the Zorethians unleashed their secret weapon, an enormous war machine, towering over the battlefield. It was a behemoth, a walking fortress of metal and destruction, capable of laying waste to entire cities in seconds. It stomped forward, its weapons firing indiscriminately, cutting down soldiers and civilians alike. The sight of it was enough to shake anyone's resolve. The war machine was nearly unstoppable. Marcus watched, his heart sinking, as his soldiers struggled to fight back. They had no way of stopping it. And then something unexpected happened. Naira, the woman who had once betrayed them all, stepped forward. She had always been a master of strategy, and now it seemed that she had come to a decision. She turned her back on the Zorethians, her face cold and unreadable. She aimed her weapon at the war machine, and in a single decisive moment fired. The massive cannon she wielded unleashed a blast of energy that collided with the war machine, sending it reeling. The blast wasn't enough to destroy it, but it was enough to slow it down, to give Marcus and his soldiers a chance. The tide of the battle shifted. Marcus didn't hesitate. He gave the signal, and the human forces launched a coordinated strike. Cloaked soldiers moved in behind the Zorethian lines, disabling their energy shields, while others used the distraction to target the war machine's weak points. It was a desperate, last-ditch effort, but it was their only shot. As the Zorethians reeled from the unexpected assault, Marcus pushed forward, leading his men through the chaos. His heart was pounding in his chest as he sprinted toward the war machine, his weapon raised. It was a race against time, and he knew that every second counted. He could see the war machine's massive cannons charging, ready to fire once again, but he refused to let that stop him. The fate of humanity rested on his shoulders, and he would not let it fall. With one final, desperate push, Marcus and his team reached the war machine. They planted explosives at its core, making sure they would be ready to detonate at the right moment. As they fell back, the Zorethians tried to regroup, but it was too late. The explosives detonated with a deafening roar, ripping the war machine apart in a fiery explosion that sent shockwaves through the battlefield. The Zorethians, stunned by the loss of their ultimate weapon, began to retreat. Marcus and his soldiers surged forward, pushing them back with every ounce of strength they had left. The battle was won. The aftermath was chaos. The battlefield was littered with debris, and the survivors were exhausted, their faces covered in dirt and blood. But for the first time in weeks, there was a sense of relief in the air. The Zorethians had been defeated. Humanity had won. As Marcus stood amidst the wreckage, looking out over the field, he saw Nera in the distance. She was walking away, her head bowed, her expression unreadable. There was no victory in her eyes, no celebration. She had chosen to stand with humanity in the end, but it had cost her everything. Marcus didn't know what to make of her decision, but he knew one thing. Humanity had triumphed. Against all odds, they had fought. They had sacrificed, and they had won. It was a hard-won victory, but it was theirs. Humanity had proven that no matter how fierce the enemy, no matter how advanced the technology, the human spirit could never be broken. And with that, they had won the war.